to welcome you all, online and offline, to our event, book launch, and we see it's a truly international event here with people from all over the world. I welcome you very much. It's about the book Non-affirmative Theory of Education and Bildung, and the editor is just on the right of me. It's Michael Uljens. I welcome very much, and I welcome Dietrich Benner, and both will make a presentation afterwards in the first part of our book launch, and in the second part we have, after a coffee and tea break, 4 commentaries from the contributors of the book, the volume, and after this we have the chance to discuss, and in this discussion we will have to deal with a lot of problems. I think one of these problems is a translation problem, and so some of the presentators are using words in German, like Bildung, and Dietrich Benner, he will present in German, but I will send the link to the English translation on the chat, so that you can follow the presentation in the English translation. So this is our scheduling. So we have 2 blocks. First, the 2 presentations of Michael Uljens and Dietrich Benner, and afterwards the commentaries and the discussion. So I think Michael will tell us much more about the seminar series, which include much more discussions on the contributions of this volume. So I don't say any more on this, and I pass to Michael.
Okay, thank you so much. If you could just put my presentation on.
Yes.
First of all, dear friends, it's an honor to be here. It's a delight to meet you all. We have been in touch, the authors in this volume, for many years. It has been a long process. It has been a COVID period and everything. Many things made it prolonged. So yes, grateful to have you all here. I also would like to wish you welcome all the you who participate in the seminar here on site in Berlin and online, as Malte said, all over the world it looks like, and it's so nice. Many stories come together in a day like this. There would be many stories. Only a part of these stories can be told here, and many more could be told. I put the headline for my presentation, Non-affirmative Theory of Education and Bildung, as a language for a global education discourse in the 21st century, and I will try to explain how I approach this from a more broader perspective. I don't go into details of different analysis of concepts, but I paint a broader picture. So the idea with this volume, first of all, I think the idea with this volume is to clarify fundamental features of the non-affirmative approach itself, of course, conceptually, historically, and also internationally. And Malte already said something about the language dilemma. Now we are trying to carry out a dialogue with genuine German, Scandinavian, Nordic concepts on education in an international, landscape, and trying to express all these things in English. I participated for 25 years ago, started this dialogue with Didaktik meets curriculum, and there we had, of course, same problem. But now I would say that this international language problem is even more broad, because it's not only between the English-speaking world and the German-speaking European. But I'm also thinking about the Asian perspective. We have to broaden this dialogue to include all Asian cultures, so to speak, and also the global South. I know from discussions with Juan Jose, for example, who participate in this volume, and also my colleagues in Argentina, that many of these ideas are not very well known in South America either. So I think we have a real challenge here. The idea is also to investigate how these concepts in general pedagogy apply in didactic, in educational leadership, in empirical research, in policy analysis, and comparative research. So this is not a purely, what do you say, traditional book or volume in dealing with the, what do you say, theoretical and philosophical perspectives of these fundamental issues. We touch upon them many places, but we also try to, it's a little bit unorthodox, and try to find new ways of application, apply this perspective, because I'm completely convinced, otherwise I wouldn't do it, but I'm completely convinced that there is a missed opportunity here. I think that so much education research is carried out without grounding it in educational theory, and this is an opportunity we have. But it's also to contrast, and therefore, the book is structured so it will contrast and compare non-affirmative education theory with other approaches and theories in education research. But not the least, I think that this volume, this seminar in itself, is a kind of manifestation of the internationally expanding research community around non-affirmative education theory. I know that many authors in this volume have been working by themselves, quite alone, not knowing each other, and not feeling a part of a larger movement, so to speak. So my task, in a way, has been very well technical in this sense. I have been bringing people together into the same room and carrying out the dialogue, so to speak. So that is really wonderful. But then, why meet up here at Humboldt? I would say that the first reason is sitting here just in front of me. It is Professor Emeritus Dietrich Benner, who has been working after Die Wende here at the university. He has been, since the 60s and 70s, he has doing very great, foundational work in non-affirmative theory, and continuing to rethink the modern approach to education. He also often says that I'm not the inventor of non-affirmative approach, but I have developed it, and I have brought some perspectives into it. And the way that Professor Benner has structured the field, I think, I already remember 1996, I said, this allgemeine Pädagogik, it should be translated into English. So in that sense, it's a interesting situation that we now, in a way, we are closing a circle compared to that. But there is also this historical perspective with this volume, and that has to do with the roots of modern education at the beginning of 19th century. If you think about this, I mean, why Berlin, why Humboldt, why don't I do this at home, back in from Finland? Fichte, Schleiermacher, Humboldt, all central important individuals working in this very city in the beginning of 19th century. New times, new challenges, new theory of education, new school structure. It means it's a reminder of that each of us, every generation, has to rethink the same questions in relation to our own time. And that is what happened here also for 200 years ago. And the challenge is, of course, the same. The question is, what can we make use of, and in what ways do we have to renew the tradition, so to speak. And that's a classical, of course, problem. And as I said, it's closing a circle. I remember when I first sat here in this very building 28 years ago as a young, I had just defended my thesis, yes, but I met up with a colleague, Jan Sjöberg, from Vasa, and we flew here and met Professor Benner and had a nice discussion, and from there it continues, so to speak. So in a way, this volume is also, for me personally, a way of closing a circle. Then I also would like to mention that when this project started, we were planning it in different ways. In fact, it started as a dialogue with Alexander von Oettingen in Denmark. He's present here. Alexander, but Alexander got a new job. He became a rector at a university in Denmark, and so his working conditions were completely different, and he couldn't continue to join the projects. So Alexander's von Oettingen's name could have been here on also, but now it's not there. If we accept the challenge that education theory has to respond to the challenges of our own times, we were discussing the problematic situation in Germany and especially here in Berlin with the lack of teachers, the social dilemmas. We need to make a picture or make it clear what are the problems we are facing, and how do we think that our education theory can respond to that. And so I just shortly would like to start from a picture like this. Education policy development and positions and reforms during the past 50 years. If you think about curriculum as centralized, curriculum as decentralized, assessment as local, teacher-controlled, assessment as external. In the 1970s and 80s, we all know that we decentralized the system, and that was done within a social democratic welfare state model. Then, in this very city, there was a dramatic shift. The Berlin Wall came down. After the Wende, Professor Benner comes to Berlin, builds up the Institut für allgemeine Pädagogik, and what happens then? One part of the dual world lost, and we moved into something called, to the right corner, social liberal market state. Now we have been living with that decentralized planning and local responsibilities and external assessment for a long time. It still continues. Today I would say we experience a re-centralization in many ways. I only point out this because everybody today understands that we need a multi-level perspective on trying to understand teaching and schools. We cannot either focus on only teaching, on leadership, governance, curriculum. And the problem is how to keep this system together. The other thing is, I pointed at the Berlin Wall that came down more than 30 years ago. Today we are reconstructing a new wall in Europe. After 24th of February 2022. And what is now going on is a dramatic shift in that sense. We don't know what will happen. But the challenge is, with these movements, we know we have seen a lot of challenges, these neoliberal policies, political populism, and this is not only happening here in Germany or in Scandinavian Nordic countries, we see it in India, we see it in China, we see it in United States, cultural neoconservatism, economic protectionism, digitalization, religious fundamentalism, sustainability issues, and not the least mistrust in media and knowledge institutions. This is the landscape. We see new tensions between East and West, North and South. I want to point out this only to remind that we theorize education in our own time. By this I do not say that education has the task to solve these problems. But it is, the question is then, do these challenges require us to modify our position, or can it be that an educational theorizing that was developed 200 years ago still may guide us in times like these? Theorizing education in a period in Europe that was 100 years before anything like a democratic polity was introduced. When we look at the policies that are offered, educational technologies, educational performativism, or competencies, I call it, focusing procedural competencies, educational conceptualism or academization, emphasizing rational reflection. More and more students should go to higher education, to university. More than half of the Finnish youth should now enter universities. We believe really in this. Or then we see ideas like Michael Young's ideas of powerful knowledge, hardcore knowledge, educational factualism. Back to that's also a strong movement in Sweden. Now back to the books, read. Or then we see educational activism. But these are of course not educational theories, they are policies. But our challenge is then, how does education research respond to this increasing complexity? So I take one example. A tendency around the world that I see and we all see is an increasing awareness of the need of a multi-level approach, multi-level thinking, understanding of teaching, curriculum, reform, work, and school development. And as myself and our group, we have been working with educational leadership, pedagogical leadership, or the pedagogical dimensions of educational leadership, I would say. That's something we have been doing. That's why I use these terms: first order educational leadership, second order, third order, and so on. And the point is that how is it possible to keep these levels together? Is it possible to keep these levels together with something like education theory? Can education theory really, theory of education and Bildung, can it help us to keep these approaches, the different levels together? In order to locate and see where non-affirmative education comes in a broader international scale and what it offers, I think it's worth to identify two broad, directions in educational theorizing or research. The first is what I call a particularist approaches, which means that if you think about the multi-level system, that we develop different theories for each level. And that leads to the idea of multidisciplinarity. You have to, in order to understand the system, you need to combine these different theoretical and disciplinary approaches. On the other hand, we also see universalist approaches, meaning that we find one theory for all levels. I think both of these approaches misses the point. Here's the same thing: particularist approaches suggesting different theories, and universalist approaches, one theory for any policy. And so I listed a number of theoretical positions and approaches. To the left, you see the universalist approaches. You find Vivian Schmidt's discursive institutionalism, Luhmann's systems theory, Bruno Latour's actor network theory, Gita Steiner-Kamsi policy borrowing, Yrjö Engeström, cultural historical theory, Bronfenbrenner ecological system theory, and so on. these are languages that are often used in education theory to ground empirical research, but they are valid for any societal context. Policy, how policies trickle down in social care or health care or education, and the same theories are used. But all these theories don't have a language of education. So why are educational theorists using these theories when they don't explain anything about education? On the other hand, we see these particularist positions approaches. We find they are all valid in one or another way for education, focusing either teaching, leadership, or policy. But then the problem is, how do you combine these different in order to keep the system together? So that you have valid languages, and I don't see examples of educational research, or very seldom I see examples of education research combining these different theories. Then that's one problem. And as you understand, I think that this non-affirmative general pedagogy, allgemeine Pädagogik approach is a position that is general but not universal, and is able to handle these different levels. But also, if you think about the other problem, the normativity problem, so to speak, normally you find these, and well, different names, examples could be put here, and we could also discuss if all these names are in the right box and so on. But the other distinction I make here is kind of reproductionist or consensus theories, functionally oriented theories, analytic. There are many names for the same thing. Discursive approaches. I contrast those approaches with critical, transformatory, emancipation, conflict theories, and normative approaches, explicitly normative in this transformative perspective. And I think that this non-affirmative approach is so strong in that it is able to move beyond both of these classical, positions. So I asked then, or I claim that non-affirmative general pedagogy outlines a third position beyond socializatory reproduction and transformatory emancipation that is generally valid for educational institutional education, but not intending to be valid for all societal perspectives. And this is, in fact, I think, this is how I think what motivates a proposal or an interest to suggest non-affirmative general education theory as a point of departure in for empirical, also empirical education research. So here is a very, for all of us, I think, a very well familiar scheme. Professor Benner's summarizing of these, constitutive basic concepts or principles, and regulative basic principles or concept of the social dimension. By the way, a small detail, should we talk about in English about basic principles, or should we talk about basic concepts? That was also a discussion we had with Andrea English, who was very helpful in translating Dietrich Benner's text into English, like as was Aline Nardo, who was very helpful in translating. And by the way, I must say that this was a really, really good example of the problems and difficulties in communicating and finding the right way to express. First, Professor Benner wrote the text in German. Then I was in contact with the translation office here in Berlin, who made the first translation. took a lot of money, several thousands of euros, and then we got the text and we were not satisfied. The only thing we was thinking, was it by Google Translate or Deeple Translate? what was the program used? But anyway, so I went through that, and then in a third row, Aline Nardo went through the text, and again it was rewritten. And then Andrea English got the text, and she rewrote it, and we were in a little bit of hurry, so she didn't go get through the whole text. But anyway, so hopefully the text is now what to say. It's a proper translation, I hope. But when we did this, I must say, I was thinking, Allgemeine Pädagogik. I mean, 300 and blah blah pages. How on earth would we be able to translate the whole book into English? It would be it's a tough thing. But it is not impossible. As you know very well, Professor Benner's books are translated to many languages, to Chinese, to, well, I don't say the languages all because I make perhaps make some mistake there, but in this sense I think that this book serves a wider English-speaking research community. I don't think I need to go into this, to explore these different concepts or principles here, but what I say is, what I think is that as a whole, this way of approaching the education as a regional societal practice, this approach gives us the language to talk about and keeps together the interactive level and the societal level, so to speak, and that's one of the strengths. So I think everybody interested in developing new education theory should, an education theory should answer these two questions. How do you explain the pedagogical interaction between individuals, and how do you explain the relation between education and other societal practices like politics, economy, culture, religion, and so on. And so to take the starting point in this non-hierarchical relation between societal practices, as Professor Benner says, that is not education theory, that is a general idea that we have or do not have this kind of, but this idea of having this non-hierarchical relation between societal practices opens up and reminds of a continuous discourse going on, so to speak, that then translates, the position 3 translates through different levels and mechanisms in society there is a pedagogical transformation, so to speak. And then again, these constitutive principles remind us that the transformation as such shouldn't violate this idea of summoning to summoning self-activity, summoning to self-activity, but summoning already self-active individuals. I remember Karl Göstemeyer, he said, Michael, when I was here in 96, he said, remember that education doesn't give self-activity to the students. They are already self-active. So they are shown self-static, so to speak. They are already self-active. Then you summon them to self-activity. And in order to be self-active, self-actively self-directed, so to speak. So and this relates to the concept of Bildsamkeit that is so difficult to translate. How do you translate Bildsamkeit? So that's why I say it. But anyway, this relational way of thinking, Bildsamkeit and Aufforderung, is what to say, as it translates into educative teaching, or erziehende Unterricht, so to speak. That is a language that I think we broadly miss. So to round up, I think that non-affirmative education theory can work and operate as a language, as a global language for a global discourse because of these two things. It operates as an analytical tool, and it operates as a norm or critical approach. For me, non-affirmative theory is a critical theory. It's an analytical tool in the sense that we ask these two questions, or these related questions. If we ask the question, to what extent and how does curriculum, policy, governance and leadership, how do these practices allow for and promote teachers and schools freedom to reflect and act in accordance, in line with non-affirmative or educative teaching? What are the degrees of freedom? And if you put that question as an empirical question, we can compare different. We can use this point of departure as a theoretical position in global comparative research. How do teachers, schools organize situations around contents that challenge the students' experience, abilities, knowing, and engage them in self-directed approach, self-activity? But also as a norm critical approach, as a teacher should be aware and recognize societal, etc., religious, cultural, economical interests that intend to influence curriculum and teaching. But as a teacher should not affirm. So I think perhaps in this tradition you could also pay more attention to the concept of anerkennung also. And if you, for example, if you think about Honneth's anerkennung, it's a very broad way of using anerkennung, but I think it might be a discussion that would be developed. But anyway, for me, I've become somehow familiar and feel it useful to use both this recognition and affirmative. But then a couple of words about the structure and the content of the volume. The book is divided in 5 different parts. I have a preface and also an introduction there at the beginning. And then we have this chapter that I already commented on, Dietrich Benner's chapter, and he can of course explain and tell about that himself more, but it's a systemische Darstellung, but it also explains historically different steps in how he developed and how he came to develop the position. The next part is non-affirmative interpretations of Didaktik, and here Thomas Rucker from Switzerland, he has a wonderful chapter explaining the erziehende Unterricht or educative teaching. Ling from China has been dwelling in Herbart's, studying Herbart's educative teaching, and she then asks how does Herbart's educative teaching, is it still valid in big data measurement and assessment era? I myself, I returned to 2 old books in this chapter. The book I wrote here, 1996-97, it was called Allmän pedagogik in Swedish. I introduced Benner's ideas in 1997 in the Scandinavian, for the Scandinavian audience. And just before that I had defended my doctoral thesis 1995 in December with Eva Terhardt as opponent. As I said, I didn't have the time to wait for Pafke to be the opponent 6 months later, so I said no. Gerhard, please come and save me. In December 1995, be my opponent. Later on, I met Klafki many times, and he also visited us. We had a wonderful seminar with Uljens and Benner, Håkan Klafki in Vasa in spring of 1997. I think it was a really interesting combination of names, Klafki, Benner, and Lensen. And the most amusing thing was that I think Benner it was Lensen who had problems with, he had a cough, so he couldn't read his paper. And then the question was, who could help me? Perhaps Dietrich, can you read my paper? And so it was wonderful memories. But anyway, so I returned to the dissertation, I returned to the book Allgemeine Pädagogik and rethink those ideas presented there in the light of. And in this process, really interesting, I have now a couple of minutes so I can say this. Of course, I already before I was familiar with the tradition of Finnish education theory, the history of Finnish education theory. But during the past maybe 5, 6, 7 years, it became so clear to me how the historical developments here in Berlin are parallel with the what happened in Finland after the Napoleonic Wars. And Napoleon and Tsar Alexander, we know what happened with the Brandenburger Tor and the horses up there. Napoleon took everything from Germany. He left Prussia. And what should the Germans do after that? Well, we have to sit down and think and have some speeches for the German nation, like Fichte did. We had to build up a new nation. 1809, after the war, 1808 and 9 that we had. So you know, Finland and Sweden was were united for 500 years, but during exactly this war, we became a part of Russia. And so we had the same type of problem. We were no longer Swedes. We didn't want to become Russians, so let us be Finns. And what does that mean? Oh, there was this guy Fichte, perhaps we have to become Finns. So we had to construct a new Finnish identity by the help of Bildung. And Snellman then was the national philosopher who read all, he was a Hegelian, but already in the 1830s the Hegelian ideas were introduced in Finland, but codified in a theory of education by Snellman in the 1850s. And so I find it really, really interesting now when with the knowledge I today have, and the eyes that now can see what I see, and then go back and read the history of Finnish education theory, I see all non-affirmativity, I see Bildsamkeit, and everything is already there. And also in Finland, this is a forgotten history, so to speak. So it has to be, and partly in this chapter, I try to point out something of this. The third part, we contrast non-affirmative education with other theoretical positions. Professor Andrea English from Edinburgh has a wonderful chapter on Dewey. Has also, you probably know, written many more great books on the same topic, so to speak. We have Juan José Sousa Alonso from La Laguna University in La Laguna in Spain, in Tenerife, who has a really, really interesting chapter on justice, forgotten relations between justice and education. We have Johannes Tyrstig and Malte. You have this. You develop your phenomenological social theoretical yeah, well, how should I say it? I've become unsure now how to present.
Yeah, it's about the formation of opinions, Meinungsbildung. It's a special perspective on the life-worldly formation of Bildung and the connection between life-world on the one hand and scientific knowledge on the other hand.
Yeah.
In Bildung.
Yeah, yeah. The final chapter in this part is written together with, I have written together, or Mari has written it together with me, Mari Mielityinen, who's sitting here. Good to see you here. You are working in Halle.
Nee, Jena.
Jena nowadays, and you have been specialized in Schleiermacher, and we deal with also intersubjectivity, subjectivity, and hermeneutics in that chapter. The fourth part is then a different kind of chapter. We move with the Scandinavian authors, Leif Moos from Denmark, also, but also partly living here in Berlin. He differs between an outcomes-based and a democratic Bildung discourse, as describing the what we say movements in today's world. Oh my God!
Part 4.
Part 4. Thank you. Sorry. Part 4. How could I turn the page? I was prepared to use the screen, and now suddenly I have to turn to paper for this, and so it makes me up. This is really important. We are not used to apply and make use of non-affirmative education theory, general pedagogy, as a point of departure in empirical research. It is possible, it is meaningful, and it's fruitful, but it is yet to be seen how this will develop. But this is an exciting thing, and we will hear more about that in the afternoon. And for the same reasons, we have also in our own group with Ann-Sophie and Alex, we are working towards empirical research. We are thinking very much about can educational research and how should education research support school development? Should it support, should we remain, what does it mean to carry out interventionist approaches? And we know, of course, this is not a new dilemma. There is a lot of action research around the world. We have our dear colleague Uljens Engelström, the world famous cultural historical education theorist. I was working with him in Helsinki University, and now we have tried to carry out an unorthodox comparative dialogue between that cultural historical activity chat and NAT, as we call non-affirmative theory. And then we have also Ann-Sophie Nylund, who is looking empirically understanding municipal education leaders in the tension between politics, professionals and parents. Then we come to the fifth part with our Scandinavian, mostly Scandinavian scholars, and also Bangping Ding from Beijing in China. Leif Moos starts, as I said, sketching out these two broad pictures for the future and to describe today's world, an outcomes-based discourse, and contrasting that with the democratic Bildung discourse. We have Andreas Nordin, who is also with us here, who is carrying out a discussion between discursive institutionalism, that also Ann-Sophie used discursive institutionalism, and non-affirmative education theory. We have Armen Tahir Slai from Norway, but originally from Kosovo, but working previously in the United States. Also raising the question of Bildung and 21st century competencies, need of mutual recognition, and then a quite interesting final chapter by Bangping Ding, and he uses the non-affirmative approach to communicate how China for many, many decades during the whole 20th century affirmatively adopted first Kairov's communist pedagogy from Moscow, and then later other North American approaches, and he claims that now we don't act affirmatively anymore in relation to other theories, we act non-affirmatively. And that's also quite interesting interpretation. So this is the volume. This is the volume. I think at the end of the seminar I come back to how we can continue the debate. So thank you all for this.